Hello everyone, this is Julia. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's almost time for Easter, so I wanted to share some fun Easter cards with you. I made this trio using some dies by Fawn and stamps by Sunny Studio Stamps, and I just had so much fun making these. I know I'm running a little bit late sharing this, but I'm also running a little bit late making these. The work just got super busy and there wasn't time before. So I want to share some time-saving tips for scene cards with you, so maybe they will help you down the track as well. First, I die cut the Meadow backdrops from Lawn Fawn in both the portrait and landscape, and I want to add the scalloped edge around the border, so I'm just trimming off an eighth of an inch around all of the sides, or that's what I plan to do. As you can see, it's totally even on both sides, but since we're covering it with a frame, it's fine. I didn't use the inside part of the sky from the backdrop, I just used the stitched cloud backdrop because that just adds a little bit more interest, I find, and you don't have to do much to the sky, just a little bit of inking, and you already have the clouds there, so that's nice, quick and easy. So I'm just using some tumbled glass and salvaged patina to ink blend that. I didn't want to add too much like dark color, just like a nice pretty spring sky. And I'm doing the same thing for the portrait one. You wouldn't have to die cut the entire panel because you would only need it for the window up top, but I just went ahead and die cut the whole panel because it was easier. Then I'm just adding some splatters of the tumbled glass salvaged patina and the liquid stardust from Lawn Fawn as well, just to give the sky a little bit of shine and some more interest. And then we're already moving on to ink blending the hills. I'm just using cracked pistachio and evergreen bough on those hills, and I'm just going over both hills just with the cracked pistachio, and then I'm ink blending the evergreen bough on both hills from the bottom. Since I die cut the scalloped frame die, I just used the inside piece because that fits perfectly beneath the hills. Just put it in the little opening so I could ink blend the hills so that they are nice and defined from each other. Just blending the colors back and forth, again keeping them fairly light. Then also adding some splatters. I'm doing 3 cards in total. I'm just showing you both portrait and landscape once because I just repeated everything on both cards. Then I went ahead and heat embossed my sentiments. I'm just using the Happy Easter from the Extra Amazing Easter from Lawn Fawn. And I'm just stamping that once, moving my cardstock up a little bit, stamping it again, and then repeating the process 4 times. In case one of them doesn't work out, I wouldn't have to heat emboss again. Then I'm just using my Wow Opaque Bright White in Super Fine, the embossing powder, and my Versamark ink. I'm using a little brush that I used exclusively for heat embossing, just to remove some stray bits of heat embossing. That was a mouthful. And I'm just using my heat gun to melt the embossing powder. Then to cut even sentiment strips, I love to use my guillotine paper trimmer. I just use the clear plastic to line up my letters, and when I trim it, it's always a straight sentiment strip, and this is just my absolute favorite way to cut them because you just can't go wrong. It's always straight and it's always even on all sides, so I love doing it this way. And there we go. And then we end up with 3 even sentiment strips. Then moving on to coloring, I stamped out the images from Bunnyville and Little Birdie from the latest Sunny Studio Stamps release, which I just think are just the cutest. Oh my god, those little bunnies are so adorable. And I went ahead and I'm just using my Copic markers to color them in. For the orange, like the carrot house and some of the eggs and the little carrots, I just used YR18, YR14, and YR12. Just blending the colors back and forth. I like to go over my images twice just to get a little bit more definition, but I still wanted to keep the colors fairly light and springy. I didn't want to go like too colorful, even though you certainly could. I'm also adding a little bit of the orange to the butterflies because I always like to color butterflies, if I can, like two-toned. So I'm just adding a little bit of orange, and then I'm adding some yellow with the YO2 so that they have a nice transition. For my greens, I'm using G17, GO2. I'm trying to color all the three layers of the top of the carrot house in different shades of green. So I'm using the G17 and the GO2 in the bottom layer, the same colors on the second, and then for the top layer I'm just using GO2 and G00, but the first layer wasn't quite dark enough, so I'm also bringing in the G29. And now you can actually see the color transition there. Then for my yellow combination on the card, I'm bringing in Y15, blending that out with YO2, adding a little bit of R20 on the cheeks, and then blending everything together with the Y00. I wanted to have like a slight variation for my birds, so I'm coloring a few of them yellow and a few of them teal. So my darkest teal shade is BG13, blending that out with BG11, and finally BG10. Again, using the R20 for the blush. For the teal, I'm using a second layer because I wanted a little bit more shading, so I'm going back in with the BG11 just for a little bit more depth. Then I'm also using a red shade. I kept the colors fairly light again, just using the R22, R20, R24, R22, R21, and R20. And I wanted a little bit of variation in the flowers, so I'm using R24, R22, and R21 on half of them. And the other ones, I'm just using the R22, R21, and R20, just to have a little bit of a difference there. I'm also using the same colors on the bigger eggs and the door on the little carrot house. Again, going over the butterfly with the red combo and also with some yellow. Then I'm adding a little blush and some pink into the ears of the bunnies with R20. And I'm using E50 markers for my browns. As my darkest shade for the bunnies, I'm using E55. And I'm blending that out with E53. And I wanted them to be like almost like beige bunnies, not quite brown. So blending that out with E51 and finally E50. And since I wanted to save time on my cards, I just colored a whole bunch of images, and I always find that it saves a lot of time when you stamp out a bunch of images at once and use the same markers to actually color them, because then you don't have to go back and forth picking more colors. And it took me just a few minutes to color all of the bunnies for all of the cards. So I'm really happy with how that went, and I used my brother's scanning cut to cut out all of the images. Then I'm just adhering the cloud background to a card base, and the cloud background and the card base are sized 4 by 5.25, so that the scalloped edge would actually just show up nicely and you wouldn't see the card base up top. Just adding some tape runner and liquid glue to add the backdrops, making sure that I don't adhere down the hills at the top, so I could put some eggs behind the grass. Also using some liquid glue to add the frame, making sure it's centered on the cards. And then off camera, I just played around with the layout of my cards, just basically evenly distributing all of the colored images. And I start by adding in the sentiment strip, and for most of the images, I'm just using liquid glue. I actually took a photo of where I wanted to place all of my images, and then I'm just going through everything and putting it where I want it. I'm adding some foam squares to the back of the bunnies, and I'm just lifting up the eggs because it took a little bit of finagling to get them behind the grass, so I didn't want to start over. So I'm just lifting them up carefully and putting a little bit of glue behind there. And I'm just adding the bunnies with some foam squares to the scene. And that finishes off card number card number one. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Then again, adding the sentiment strip and gluing down all of my images. I just love that little carrot house. It's so cute. And then, of course, the cute little birdie. And doing the same thing again with the little piles of eggs. And also with the little flowers. I just added 3 into my scene. And I'm adding a little butterfly on one so that the little bunny is just meeting a new friend with the butterfly, which I thought was just so cute. The other bunny is just holding a little egg, and I'm adding both bunnies with some foam squares. And then for the third card, again, adding the sentiment strip first. I always like to do that because that gives me like the height of the other images that will go below. I'm adding the branch first, and I'm just trimming off the edge on the left because I had already adhered the frame, so I couldn't layer it behind. So I'm just trimming that off and adhering it on the left side with enough space to add my 2 cute little birdies. Just nestling one between the branches and one sitting on top of them. And also adding some glue behind the butterflies. I'm just lifting up the flower slightly so I wouldn't have to figure out the placement again. For this one, I just used the beautiful egg with a bow and 2 cute little bunnies. Those, again, I adhered with foam squares. Then for finishing touches, I wanted to add a bit more sparkle, so I'm using the Nouveau Aqua Shimmer Pen and Glitter Gloss, and I'm just going over the flowers and the eggs as well as the butterflies. And then I'm using a white Jelly Roll pen in the size 10, and I'm just adding some white gel pen highlights to all of my images. I know it's an extra step and you could certainly skip at this point because there's really no need for it, but I really like what it adds to the cute little images. And there we have our cute little trio of cards. I had so much fun making these, and all in all, these took me from start to finish, die cutting, cutting out the images, stamping and coloring, and everything took me about 2.5 hours. So for 3 cards, I think that's pretty good. And honestly, if you just stamped out a few more images, I doubt it would have taken you a lot longer than that. So you could easily just make a few more of these. I really hope you enjoyed it. I would love to know which one of these is your favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you again next time. Until then, have an amazing day.